concept of a hydrogen economy is really an ammonia economy. And it's something that's very often talked about. And I don't necessarily disagree, but it's a little bit related to what I mentioned earlier. It will depend. The historical idea of you have oil, you have gas, you have coal, and those are your options, and you make do with whatever you have, that will change dramatically, and the energy landscape will become much more fragmented and diversified, which will mean that in some reasons, yes, ammonia will be a very good option, but it also depends again on what you want to do with it. If your purpose is energy, then ammonia can be a really good carrier to do so. And one of the often heard advantages of ammonia, of course, is that part of that infrastructure already exists, although I would argue that that infrastructure currently is much smaller than what you would need if you really wanted to be the main energy carrier. But yes, there's experience, and there are ships, and there are designs that work. But on the other hand, if your goal is not necessarily to turn it into ammonia, but to use it as an industrial resource, then you don't necessarily want to convert that ammonia back into hydrogen again, and then use the hydrogen and deal with the losses that you have. In those cases, perhaps it's more efficient to keep it as liquid hydrogen, for instance, in which case it is hydrogen at the beginning, and it is hydrogen still when it goes into your fuel cell. So there's a lot of different arguments that you can have on what that will be. And I do think that in the end, it will be a combination system of multiple different things that, again, depends on where you are.
Yeah, I think to echo Arnold, it's agreed that there is unlikely going to be a dominant form of hydrogen carrier in the future, because at the end of the day, every use case, every situation is unique in their own sense, right? So you're kind of looking at two key variables. How large of a scale of hydrogen are you carrying is one, and two is how far are you moving it? I mean, if I'm moving hydrogen from Singapore to Malaysia, I don't think we need to go through anything complex in terms of converting it or storing it in another form. I think you can just liquefy it and drive it across the causeway. That's probably the simplest way to go about it. But that comes up to that question where I think we all for once agree on is that production of hydrogen is not going to be available everywhere, especially if you're talking about green hydrogen. But even then, when you're looking at gray and blue, brown hydrogen, even that's isolated in key regions. So at the end of the day, there's going to be a variety of form factors out there. Ammonia is definitely one of them. I do not believe ammonia will pick up as much as many would like it to. I think that it will only have its place in sort of the future hydrogen economy for very specific types of locations. So maybe ports that already handle ammonia, chemical plants that already handle ammonia, that's probably the best way to go. But from our analysis at Lux, one of the key future hydrogen carriers are liquid organic hydrogen carriers, LOHCs. And that's really not brand new, but it's the one that many, especially in Japan, are pushing for right now. So Japan's really spearheading all the initiatives around that. They have a project of moving green hydrogen from Australia to Japan via LOHC. This is Chiyoda Corporation. They're also working, Mitsubishi Corporation's also working with sort of Singapore Gas in terms of moving green hydrogen from Australia to Singapore as well via LOHC. LOHC obviously has its advantages. It's far more efficient in terms of it's less costly than other forms, especially around that 1,000 to 10,000 kilometer distance range, type of transport. But again, it might not be the best choice once you get to 100,000 kilometers. Once you get to a longer distance, once you get to a larger scale, it's probably not the best choice. And that's kind of where these other form factors, such as liquefied hydrogen, or even in some cases, why even convert it to hydrogen? Let's just move the renewable electricity around via AC/DC transmission lines. So I think that hydrogen will be sort of the energy that's moved around, but how it's moved around, I believe, is going to vary quite a bit.
Ranil?
Yeah, I disagree a bit with what was said previously. I don't believe that the hydrogen economy will be a mix of different carriers. I do believe that there will be a dominant carrier that will emerge, and that dominant carrier would be ammonia. And the reason I say this is because if you look at how to transport hydrogen over long distances, we're talking about very large amounts of hydrogen. You can either compress it, you liquefy it, you convert it to a chemical, which is either ammonia or methanol, or you use a liquid organic carrier. And compressing and liquefaction are viable options, but liquefaction is still something that's being developed at a large scale today. And right now we're seeing the first liquid hydrogen ships being launched, and it's not going to be widespread in the next 5 to 10 years. If you take methanol, for example, to be able to convert hydrogen to methanol, you need carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide will have to come from somewhere. If you want to be renewable, it's direct air capture, which is very expensive. If you take, for example, liquid organic carriers, yes, the technology may be cheaper than all the other options for transporting hydrogen. The issue is that today there is less than 5 companies developing liquid organic carriers around the world. Schroeder is one of them. Hydrogenous Technologies in Germany is another one of them. But all of that technology, this is all at the early stage today. And if it takes 5 to 10 years for the technology to be ready for commercial deployment, you also have to build those manufacturing facilities for that liquid organic carrier to supply enough carriers for the entire hydrogen economy. That is not easy. That will take time. And ammonia does not have any of these issues. Yes, ammonia may be more expensive, but you can convert hydrogen into ammonia. You only need nitrogen, which is widely available. You have an infrastructure for ammonia that already exists today. This is not the case for liquid hydrogen or organic carriers and so on. So you can leverage that infrastructure. You have the technology suppliers for ammonia. Ammonia is a very big industry because of fertilizer. You have large catalyst companies like Haldor Topsoe who already have those massive facilities for producing the catalyst. They have the experience for building mega facilities for ammonia production. So really, I think the ease of adoption is something that needs to be considered as well. Many other options may be cheaper, they may be more efficient, but building that infrastructure, getting that adoption up and going, that's going to be tough. Ammonia, you have a much more easier path to adoption, given that every country is probably importing ammonia at the moment.
So I think the issue here is the timeline, right? Because in the near term, absolutely. And ammonia right now is something that is easier to adopt because everybody knows how. There is the infrastructure. All of these arguments are entirely valid. But at the same time, if at some point we wouldn't change to better options for technologies, we would all still be using pigeons to send messages to other people. And frankly, we would never move away from oil and gas in the first place, right? So in the longer term, I do expect that some of these systems will come under pressure to change to something that is better, whether that is because the costs are better, because the logistics works better, or because people don't want to have ammonia trucks driving around their house all the time because it's pretty deadly if things go wrong. While LOHC, really you don't necessarily want to bathe in it, but it's nowhere near as poisonous as something like ammonia. So I do think that there are lots of projects being worked on today around electrolysis, not as many blue hydrogen projects as I would like to see, to be honest, but that's a whole other debate. And many of these are looking at ammonia for the carrier because that is your only option today. But I think if we look at something like 2040, 2050, it will no longer be your only option. It will no longer be your best option. So then things will start to change.